Individual freedom and state power. Welcome, Vanakkam, Swagatham, Vande Mataram. This is the second in the series focused on understanding the various aspects of freedom, an ideal that all of us cherish, an ideal that's included in the foundational vision of our Constitution, therefore mentioned specifically in the preamble to the Constitution among the four basic values, the other being justice, equality, and fraternity. So, in that order: justice, liberty, equality, fraternity. And in fact, we must deem it as part of our citizenship responsibilities to understand the meaning, the scope, and reach of these foundational constitutional values. And therefore, the reflections that we are undertaking on the nature of freedom is in sync with our duty and our privilege as citizens of India. Now, in this video, for our present purpose, our focus shall be on the relationship between personal liberty and power, particularly power as it is embodied and in and exercised by the state. The state is the foremost and the most potent purveyor of power, the institution that is authorized to exercise power, and that exercise of power is subject to checks and balances. But we all know from personal experience, collective experience, historical experience, that the extent to which these checks and balances function would vary from time to time, from one form of government to another. In fact, one government to another in the same mode of political governance. Now, let me begin with a contemporary, an immediate event in order to illustrate the contextual relevance of the reflection that's included in this video. One of the issues that's being discussed with some degree of heat, if not light, is the administrative order issued by the UP state administration that all the shops along the roads traversed by Kavadiyars must display the name of the proprietor in bold letters. Presumably, this is to enable the Kavadiyars to avoid eateries run by members of a certain community, which is then justified on the ground that it is necessary to preserve the spiritual or the religious purity of the Kavadiyars. I have no comment to make on the religious justification or the administrative minutiae and the kind of constitutional validity. All these are responsibilities to be undertaken by the justice delivery system or the various political parties, opinion makers. I don't belong to any of this. I'm a simple private citizen who exercises the freedom to think as well as enjoys the luxury of sharing the fruits of my thinking with discerning people like all of you. Now, why was such a thing contemplated? Such a thing was never done before. Why has this been introduced? Now, clearly, this is an exercise in state power. I don't want to go into the politics of it. I'm adhering strictly to the philosophy of it, the philosophy of power and the psychology of power, both. Now, the most glaring thing here that we all of us must pay heed to is the fact that there is a relationship of inverse proportion between the freedom of citizens and the power of the state. The more powerful the state becomes, the more arbitrarily it will be tempted to act. And the arbitrariness in the exercise of power by the state has this unfortunate result of either abrogating the freedom of the citizen or hurting it very seriously, as in the present case. Now, understandably, the representatives of a particular community criticize this step as food apartheid. I reserve my opinions on the matter because that's not our immediate concern. It's not that I don't have opinions. I'm against any religious significance being ascribed to food habits. I'm of the confirmed opinion that what type of food an individual eats must belong entirely to the domain of personal liberty, and nobody, not even the state, has anything to do with or should have anything to do with it. Though the state, when it wants to sting the people or a section of the people into the realization as to how much power it wields and exercises, will trespass into this territory, which in every civilized society will be set apart, scrupulously set apart, as a domain of private choice and private action. So now the point I want to make is this. The power of the state can be enlarged and exercises only at the expense of somebody or the other, or a certain section of the citizenry. It's very important to realize this. The power of the state, if it is to be made a felt reality, and the more powerfully you want to make citizens feel the impact of the power you exercise, the power of the state, the more you have to encroach into the domain of personal liberty. In other words, the negatively impactful exercise of power on the part of the state will result in the abrogation of at least a part of the freedom of citizens. For example, the proprietors of the eateries along the path that the Kavadiyas would take, they don't have the choice to not display their names. It is not a law in the country at large that everywhere the names of the proprietors and in fact also the workers in the eateries should be displayed, so that you can be identified as to which religion you belong to, with all the consequences that follow. These are unpleasant things. I want to go into those details. So what I want to suggest is that this actually involves an encroachment into the very protected area of private personal liberties. In every country, in every system of thought, in every idea of human rights, it is held as sacrosanct that the state has no business to encroach into the private realm, the realm of private choices. However, this is not a straightforward case like that, because when you run an eatery in public, it's no longer a private activity, but the private parties, the matter of personal choice is whether or not you should display your name as a proprietor to be identified in terms of a particular religion, which then lends itself to discrimination, and you are protected against discrimination by the Article 14 and 15, right to equality as well as right to be protected against discrimination, the two articles in the Indian Constitution. It's doubly protected because that's considered so sacrosanct. Now, I'm going to take you away from this particular episode because it's too near to us. It's happening at this time. Therefore, it's too painful to meditate on that or deal with it without provoking hostile, negative reactions. Let me take you a long, long time back to the Athens, some 2000, 2300, 2400 years ago. In the Athens of those days, the total number of citizens was around 15 to 20,000. Let's take the higher number, 20,000, because census in those days, the exact records and all are problematic. But we have approximate numbers. About, let's say, 20,000 citizens in Athens, the most prominent city-state among the many city-states that comprise Greece. It will be of interest for you to know that to support this 2,000 free citizens of Athens, there were 400,000 slaves. 400,000 slaves. That is to say, on an average, if an Athenian free man had 20 slaves attached to him. It is this that made the French thinker Rousseau, R-O-U-S-S-E-A-U, Rousseau say that human freedom can exist only on the foundation of the slavery of many. The freedom of a few has to stand on the slavery of many. It's a very important thought. The freedom of a few will necessarily stand on the slavery of the many. And he states it as a universal dictum. And having thought long about this, I have to say that I'm inclined to agree with Rousseau. Now, of course, this shape, the particular form, the extent, the scale of slavery will all vary. Sometimes it may be subtle, sometimes it may be crude. But there is a connection between power and human slavery. Wherever power is idolized, wherever power is maximized, wherever power is liberated from checks and balances, creating a condition of dictatorship, and that's the definition of dictatorship. Power liberated from all checks and balances is dictatorship. The effect of it is dictatorship. There, human freedom is seriously imperiled. So therefore, whenever we covet power, and it's not only those who hold high and exalted offices who covet power, every human being has this innate temptation, the temptation to exercise power over others, the power to dominate. If you bring two or more people together, you will see this at work. In the case of two people in interpersonal relationship, one person will dominate. And that person will somehow persuade himself or herself to believe that he or she has a natural right to exercise control. It is astonishing as to what extent human nature is predicated on the control orientation. If somebody can control you, that person will control you, male or female, rest assured. That actually means that we have to be always on the vigil against the proclivity of other people to encroach into our life and to compromise our personal liberties. Now, there are various tactics used for it. For example, the politics of flattery. Many people will flatter you just to take control over you, because once you are flattered and you fall for the flattery, you can easily be controlled by that person. And the extent to which you allow yourself to be controlled by that person is also the extent of your slavery. There are people who would distribute lollipops to purchase your freedom. And if you're foolish, if you're naive, if you do not value your freedom and personal dignity, you will fall for it. There are people who try to infect a society with an extraordinary degree of adoration and adulation of power. They will make you believe that the greatest blessing a country can have, and therefore the greatest good that can happen to you is that you have a leader who radiates power, who ripples with power. The simple truth of the matter is that the more powerful a person is, the more unmindful he will be of your freedom. And as Lord Acton said, all power corrupts and absolute power absolutely. Corruption is a condition that corrodes your freedom. You will see that in every society where corruption is operative, human freedom will always be imperiled and limited. For example, if your society is free from corruption, you can have your things done in a systematic, routine manner. That's your right. And you have the freedom to set certain processes in motion and the entitlement to assume that within a certain specified period of time, the application you have moved will bear fruit. Not so in a corrupt society. Your freedom to get certain things done, which is also your entitlement, will be seriously compromised in a corrupt society, because unless and until you grease the palms, nothing will move. And there your sense of freedom will begin to be eroded. So please understand that there is a connection between corruption and freedom. And therefore, the people who actually want to thrive in a society beyond their legitimate measure will have a vested interest in corrupting the society. This is the reason why corruption can never be eradicated. Ordinary people will feel a sort of ethical resentment about corruption, but the economic, social, political elite revel in corruption because for them corruption is good news. Corruption enables them to have their way. They don't have to wait. Everything will be done just like that for them. The whole country will fall flat before them. The corruption is good news for the elite, the powerful, the privileged. But corruption seriously erodes the freedom of the common man. That's my theme. Now, if you look at the various events that have happened in recent times, particularly any event, any development, any turn of the administrative screw, which makes a section of the citizens anxious, worried, alienated, you will find that what is involved there is the interplay between power and freedom. Power and freedom. The exercise of power on the part of a particular office, person, party, whatever, agent of action, is meant to curtail the freedom of this section, whichever section it is. It could be even Adivasis, tribals, Dalits, not only minorities, it could be anybody. Or in the political context, doesn't matter which religion, which group you belong to. If you don't belong to my party, then you have a problem. You're not entitled to full freedom. Subscription to my ideology is a necessary condition for you to enjoy your full freedom, if at all full freedom is imaginable. Or if you don't subscribe to my ideology, you're not entitled to freedom at all, and the consequences that follow. So therefore, you find that it is necessary for us to be very clear about the interplay between state power and personal liberties. And as citizens, if we value our freedom at all, we have to be vigilant, as Nehru said, about the extent to which state power is inflated. And the more the state power is inflated, the more it will shake itself free of all checks and balances. And unbridled power will certainly work against the larger interests of citizens, and in particular, the extent of freedom that citizens would be allowed to enjoy in any body politic whatsoever. So, endorsing the cult of absolute power in the state which appeals to the psychology of the masses, because for them, the idea of exercising power to the detriment of a particular group, the supposedly hated group, the group that is working against national interests, which are all labels randomly, arbitrarily stuck on people in order to denigrate them. The more that happens, the more psychologically they sense the euphoria of power. The masses can never have power. The masses can only have vicarious power, that is, power exercised by somebody else, thinking that they are doing so on their behalf and for their sake. That's called the vicarious enjoyment of the exercise of power. They don't exercise power at all, but somebody else does it, and they believe that it is done on their behalf and for their sake. They will not benefit to the extent of a piece of straw, but they derive a lot of psychological satisfaction that power has been exercised to the detriment of a targeted group, which they believe somehow has enhanced their freedom. But it's a negative feeling because this euphoria is induced in them only by the negative fact that the real victims are somebody else, and they don't belong to that particular targeted group. But it doesn't amount to any advantage for them, and nor does it enlarge their freedom or enable them to add anything of value to their life. So, in a context of negativity in regard to human freedom, which is initiated and aggravated by the cult of power, citizens have to be particularly vigilant about protecting their freedom. It is for this reason that Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru said, probably is quoting from some other author, that eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. Eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. But that vigilance is not merely a matter of keeping awake. It's a matter of understanding what freedom is, understanding the interplay between freedom and power, understanding the psychology and sociology of freedom as well as power. That is something that we are hoping to undertake through this series of videos, of which this is the second. And further thoughts we will arrive at in course of time. And once again, I close this series for the time being, or close this video, thanking you for being part of this journey of discovery. All the best. Thank you. Jai Hind.